I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for joining. During the webinar at any time, if you have a question, go ahead and just post it in the chat. I'm going to be monitoring the questions, and at the end, I will go ahead and ask those questions, and Chris and Trisha will try to answer them. Hopefully, we'll get to everybody's, but if you have a question, you can write us at info@mache.org. So without any further conversation, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Trisha and Chris.
Thank you, Dale.
Thanks so much, Dale. I am Trisha Cole, and I am a mom in the trenches of homeschooling, just like I think all of you here tonight, or at least most of you. And so I came from homeschooling my kids today to help present this tonight. We're excited to be here. I'm in charge of a few reminders before we get started. I wanted to remind you that there is a handout. If you're watching the recorded version of this, the links that we're going to talk about tonight are still in the handout, and the handout link is below the video. All the other links we're going to talk about will also be listed under the video where you're watching. All right, a few more things before we get started. One is, it is our hope and our prayer that tonight, as we chat about record keeping, that wherever you're at in that journey, that you are just empowered to take the next step, and that you receive what we share tonight with grace. Moms, ourselves who homeschool and who have homeschooled, who do not have all the answers, who have not always kept perfect records, who have not done all of these things right. And so we just want to extend you the grace to just be where you are tonight and to make a step forward wherever that is. Whether you feel like you have your act together, whether you're overwhelmed because this is brand new, or whether you're like, I am behind, I haven't gotten this figured out yet, I think you're going to get a lot of help and resources tonight. And so we're praying that God would just give you one thing to take from tonight that you could enact in the next week. And let's do that. Let's pray right now that God would just speak to each one of us exactly what we need to hear as we talk tonight. Father God, we stop to recognize that you're good. Thank you for making the technology work tonight. Thank you for the ability to homeschool our children, the wonder and goodness it is, albeit sometimes hard, to be with them day to day, in and out. And what a gift it is to be a mom, to be a dad, to be a homeschooler. God, we pray that you would encourage us in our journey tonight. God, I pray that you would just give each one a nugget or two that they can take from here, that you would help with the feelings of overwhelm and anxiety, and that you would give us wisdom in what to speak, and that you would give them wisdom in what to pick up. And God, we recognize that all of the good gifts that we have are from you. And so we thank you for good gifts tonight. And I just pray it is our desire that this be a gift for those who hear, that they might be blessed and encouraged to take the next step. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So record keeping can feel a little overwhelming. I hear lots of questions. Some of the common ones are, what kind of records do I need to save? I don't know, this is overwhelming. I'm so far behind in record keeping. How will I ever catch up? Anybody ever feel that way? Keeping records is overwhelming. How could I simplify it? And I don't have time to write down everything we do every day. Do I really have to? And that's what we want to talk about tonight. Yes, you really should. And so keeping records is important. And we want to share some reasons why and help you feel a little bit more motivated to make this a priority if it's been a struggle for you. First of all, in Minnesota and many of the 50 states, the majority of the 50 states, it is a law. It's required in their homeschool laws that we keep good records. And so we want to obey the state's homeschool laws. I think we want to submit to the authority. God commands it in Romans 13. He says, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. And really, this isn't a law that's going against anything that God says we shouldn't do. So we want to keep good records and follow the law in Minnesota. And next, really, record keeping is proof of a good education. Should anyone ever question the quality of your child's education at home, your good records will show that you have taught your children well. Records also provide proof of education for if your student goes on into college or into the military. And even some employers will ask for school records. And so this will prove that you gave your student a good education if you provide and if you have these records saved. Next, we can also use our record keeping to help us in planning for younger kids in our family. I remember many of the years that I homeschooled, I would pull out records from previous years to see how I taught the older child in third grade or so on. I didn't have to recreate the wheel, so to speak. I could just look at what I did before and do it again if it worked well. So it saved me a lot of time to have those records. Record keeping can also be very encouraging. Many of us as homeschool parents worry that we're not doing enough. Anybody relate to that? I know I had a lot of anxiety at times that, maybe I wasn't covering everything I should. I remember the first year that I homeschooled, I sat down and I would every day, I had just a notebook. That's how I kept records. I wrote anything educational that we did that day. My oldest was a first grader and the next was a preschooler, and then we had 2 toddlers. And so when I would write that down at the end of the day, I would be amazed at the things that we covered and all the things that the kids had learned that day. It was really encouraging to me. And as I continued to refine my record keeping approach, I moved on from the notebook approach to something as I had more kids join our homeschool as the kids grew up. I just continued to find that keeping records gave me confidence because I'd see so much that we had accomplished, and it built my confidence that my kids were really learning a lot. Records can also help you evaluate and determine if you need to make changes in your curriculum or your methodology as you look at whether your student is struggling and if they just are doing really, really well too. Sometimes your kids are ahead of the game and you can move faster. Achievement tests are one of those records that you would keep that would show this sort of thing. But your regular tests and methods of evaluating also can help you see that how you can adjust your students' education. I also believe that record keeping will help make high school transcripts easier to create. The transcript is one of the most important homeschool records you'll create. Colleges, the military, and even some employers will want to see proof of your students' education based that like a transcript. And if you have developed good record-keeping habits when your children are young, you'll be much more confident and experienced when it's time to create that high school transcript. It will help you make it much easier to create that good transcript. I remember years ago when I was the phone responder for Mache, I had a mom call in and she was frantic. She said, my son is a senior and I realized I don't have anything. I haven't got a transcript started and I didn't keep any records. I don't know what to do. And it was really hard to know how to help her because she hadn't saved anything. And so I from that experience, I was like, wow, you really want to make sure you keep records of what your students done academically and so on, so that you can do a quality transcript that's accurate. Lastly, keeping good records reduces stress. That may sound funny because I know we already have a lot on our plate as homeschoolers, but keeping records I know it feels like one more thing to do, but in the long run, it actually will relieve your stress because of these reasons I've just mentioned. You're obeying the law, that you don't have to have any fear that someone's going to come and say you're doing something wrong. You have proof that you're doing a good job and you can use it to help you with planning and so on. It's encouraging, all these things. So it really does relieve your stress. Believe me, it's worth it to keep good records.
If record keeping is a part of the law, then we want to talk about what the law says about our records tonight. So let's talk about Minnesota homeschool laws. We are not going to cover all of the Minnesota homeschool laws. If you're already homeschooling, you're probably somewhat familiar with them. If you're not familiar with Minnesota homeschool laws, we're going to drop a link. It's on the handout. We're going to drop a link in the chat right now. That's a video. It's about a 12-minute video that covers all of the Minnesota homeschool laws that you can take a look at. We're just going to cover the record keeping part tonight. So what does Minnesota say? It says that you need to keep records that show that you're teaching the required subjects. What are the required subjects? Well, I've got a sneak peek there because I had a little snafu with my slide. Science is definitely one of them. Required subjects are basic communication skills, and they include reading, writing, literature, and fine arts. Also math and science, all required subjects that need to be taught in your homeschool. Health and physical education, and social studies. Social studies is very encompassing. It covers history, geography, government, citizenship, and economics. Now, before you have a panic attack about all of those subjects, I just want you to keep in mind that as you look at this list of subjects, there is no specific requirement in Minnesota law for how often each of these subjects must be taught or at what grade levels they are taught. You just need to cover these subjects in the course of your homeschooling of your children. And so there's a lot of flexibility written into there, even though that's a pretty lengthy list. I also want to encourage you that when you really dig down into what you're doing with your kids, a lot of times you're doing a lot of these things without even really thinking about it. But that is a talk for another night. We're only talking about record keeping tonight. So you're going to want to keep record of all of those subjects being taught. Another record that's important to keep is your test results. Minnesota requires that all homeschoolers take nationally normed standardized tests once a year. And again, what those are and all of that is another video. But for the purposes of record keeping, you just need to keep hold of those test results. You're not required to report them to anybody or share them with anybody. You just need to have a copy of them on hand. There are some other records that are required that we maintain, and one of them is class schedules. We already had a question in the chat about this tonight. This does not need to be complicated. It can be very simple. I want to show you just a couple of very simple class schedules that you could put together for your school. This is not something that needs to be done every week or every month or even every year. When you find a schedule that works for your homeschool, you can keep it. This is a very basic schedule that offers a lot of flexibility to this family. They list what subjects they're going to cover in the morning, what subjects they're going to cover in the afternoon, and they even include their evening because looks like they're covering some Bible with Alana, and they're also covering some physical education with soccer. And so this is a class schedule of what is happening in their school. You could post that right on we keep bulletin boards in our dining room because that's where we homeschool. You could post that. And if it works in this year, great. If it works next year, you still have a class schedule. You don't have to reinvent the wheel on this one. Here's another one that offers a little bit more structure when it comes to time. So here they've outlined from 9 to 10 what we're doing, and from 10 to 11 all the way down to 3 o'clock. And they don't outline necessarily what subjects they're going to tackle from 10 to 11, just that that's their first learning session and their second learning session. Again, they've even wrapped in their physical education and delight directed studies into the day. And so this is just another daily schedule, a class schedule that you can keep that meets the requirements of the law without being cumbersome. And you know what? So many of these requirements are so helpful for us. Like, it's helpful for me and for my kids to have a structure to our day. And so this is a good thing for us to create a schedule. It doesn't take long, and I think we benefit from it for the rest of your homeschooling year, essentially, and even longer if you continue to use the schedule. All right, what else? Materials used for instruction. You're required by the state of Minnesota to keep materials that you're using for instruction. This also does not need to be overwhelming or complicated. This is what a curriculum list from 2020 and 2021 looks like for one of my kids. She was in 7th grade. I listed the subject, what the curriculum we were going to use, that's the material we're using for instruction, and who it was by. It can be very simple. It can just be a Word document that you keep on your computer or that you physically print out, your choice. We have a record keeping bundle that we're going to talk about tonight, and this is one of the things in that bundle. This is a curriculum list that is a template in Microsoft Word. You just go in, subject, name of curriculum, and the edition. Once you're done for the year, you're done for the year. And again, the benefit, Chris already mentioned this, but the benefit is now I've got this. Next time I have a 7th grader, I know exactly what I used. I can make decisions about whether I want to use it or not, but I don't have to go scrounging for or trying to remember what it is we did. And so we benefit by keeping these pretty simple records. All right, another one is we are required to keep records on the methods we use to assess student achievement. So there's no rule about what kind of assessment you can use, and there's a ton of ways to know if your student is learning. You can, if you're using a traditional curriculum with textbooks and workbooks, then you maybe are choosing to use the tests that are already in the book. That's evaluating students and their learning. You can have them do projects. I had a student who was learning about the Jewish culture last month, and she braided challah bread. She made her own challah bread from scratch. She braided it in the kitchen. We had a great conversation. Some of her siblings hopped in. It was very cool. That was an assessment. That project that she completed, that we took pictures of, that was an assessment. And again, it's a fun memory. It's a fun picture to have in my phone. Requirements aside, that's a really wonderful thing for us to have that. There are other ways to assess students, but anytime you're using kind of a packaged curriculum, a reading, language arts, history, science, they all have those assessments built right in. You don't have to invent anything new, just use the curriculum. But more, I would say, looser curriculums like a Charlotte Mason, Charlotte Mason curriculums assess student learning? Well, of course. When a teacher reads to a student or a student reads their material, one of the principles of Charlotte Mason is that they narrate. The student would narrate that back to the teacher. And so there's an assessment. You're doing an oral assessment. And if you're using something like Ambleside Online, that's written right into the curriculum. You don't have to do anything extra. You just need to follow the curriculum and check on your students' learning. I do want to say that if you're creating your own curriculum, that's great, but you should be mindful that you should work assessment into the process of your curriculum, and you should have a record of that assessment, whether that was an oral assessment that you did or any one of the ones that we've named already. I want to encourage you as a part of record keeping to keep other official documents. I'm talking about your intent to homeschool paperwork that was due on October 1st. And if you haven't filed that, please don't go to bed tonight until you have filed that, because your students are going to be considered truant. But your intent to homeschool paperwork, keep it. Keep a digital or a paper copy of that every year with your students' other records. Your kids' immunization records, because it goes with the homeschool paperwork, right? So we want to keep that. And I'm going to encourage you to keep any correspondence you have with the state or the school district. When we were first homeschooling in Minnesota, we wanted to claim some of our educational expenses on our taxes. And so my husband was like, well, I don't know, does this language arts curriculum with our Christian worldview over it count? Can we actually claim that as an educational thing? So he emailed the Minnesota tax office and they got right back to him. And they said, yes, as long as it's a language arts curriculum, then you're good. It can have a religious worldview. If it's a Bible curriculum, that's not allowable. And so we've just kept that over the years, because that's great assurance for us in case there's ever a question. I had an issue this fall where our homeschool is a tax exempt entity, just like any homeschool in the state is allowed to be. And so we've applied for that, and we don't pay sales tax on our goods that we purchase for school purposes. And we were in a music store purchasing an instrument, and I wanted to use our sales tax, and the music store had never done this before. So they wanted my certificate of exemption, which of course I could not produce because I had lost it. So there's an example of me not doing this well. But you know what? I emailed the state. They sent me a new certificate of exemption. And while I was at it, I inquired with the state, does this qualify under the sales tax exemption? And they said, sure does. So now I've got an email record of a unique sales tax exemption of a musical instrument purchase that I can hold on to in case I, or maybe even a friend, has a question like that in the future. We're going to recommend you keep some other documents that aren't required by the state of Minnesota, but we just think they're good documents to have around. And we're going to talk throughout the evening about ways that you can easily keep these that don't create a ton of extra effort. Attendance is one of them, and we're going to talk about a couple of ways to do that in a little bit. But sometimes, again, going back to encouraging, it's really encouraging to see the days that we have completed school and how many we've done. And we were just talking last week about how we've completed 7 weeks of school already. And we hadn't taken a single day off. And so we took Friday off to watch cartoons because I had been keeping track of their attendance, and I knew that they had completed 7 weeks of school with no school days off. And so time for a break. And that was encouraging to them. Okay, textbook and workbook information. This is an easy and helpful thing to have around, again, for future students that are coming up through the ranks, and just for evidence of that good education. You can take those textbooks and workbooks. Sometimes you can even find these online and download them. The table of contents, make a copy of that, or download it from the website of the distributor that's selling it, and just hold on to that. Keep it with all your other records. Chris is going to talk about how to do that in a little while, but keep that with all your other records. We also recommend you keep student work samples. This is another one where I think we greatly benefit in the future in a way that we don't anticipate right now when we keep our students' work. We recommend you keep one example of their work per quarter each year. And it's a real joy to go back and look at that stuff. The kids think it's so funny how bad their handwriting was, how bad their writing was. Look at that cute picture. Oh, I remember that story. I had to write that for language arts. That's so sweet. And what did you write for language arts? Because sometimes we look at these things together as a family. So there's a lot of joy in keeping those work samples for your kids. And I think Chris is even doing some of that with her grandkids now, looking at old work samples. So we recommend you keep those. And then of course, you're going to want to keep transcripts for high school. We're going to talk in depth about that tonight. And then achievements and awards. Was your student in a concert or a piano recital? Did they get first place in the spelling bee? Keep those awards. They're good records to have around. They speak to a well-rounded education. And in high school, they'll help your students when it's time to apply for college. All right, how long do I keep records? Are you required to keep 13 years of records? I'm graduating as senior this year. Do I need to keep 13 years of records for her and her 5 siblings in my garage? Thankfully, the answer to that question is no. I don't think we have a big garage, but I don't know if it's that big. So here's a recommendation for elementary and middle school. You're gonna want to keep 3 years of records. And then in high school, of course, you're going to want to keep 4 years because the transcript runs for 4 years. And so you're going to want to keep support for your transcript for all 4 years of high school. And then just a reminder, if your student is in 7th or 8th grade and they're completing high school level work, we have students that finish algebra in 7th grade and geometry in 8th grade sometimes in our house. We hold on to that work because that becomes a part of the high school transcript. So make sure you save any of that work in middle school that's going to end up on a transcript for your students someday.
One more thing that we really like to encourage families to do is to keep record of goals that you might set for your children and for your family. Both of us do this, and it's not required by the state, but it really helps give you direction and improves your homeschool experience because you see the progress your students are making as they reach their goals, and they see their progress, and it's encouraging. So before you start your school year, or now, if you haven't done this before, pray and ask the Lord for help, and then sit down with your spouse or a support person and think through the individual goals you want to set for each of your kids. This would be like spiritual goals, academic goals, and character goals. Think through these things, and how do you want your kids to grow in these areas? Where are some weaknesses? What would you like to do? And then you can do this with your family as well. Set goals with your family. I know Trisha's family does that. Her husband sets a goal for the year. Maybe she can talk on that later. And then as you set these goals, you can use that business term, the SMART goals, which is just an acronym for making sure the goals are specific and measurable, attainable, reasonable, and time-bound. I know one year our son tested lower in spelling than his grade level, which can happen very easily. And so that next year, the goal for him was that he would reach his grade level by the end of the school year in spelling. And so that was our goal. It was achievable. And at the end of the year, he did make it. But we had to be very strategic. And that's what you do then when you set these goals is you strategically figure out how you're going to reach those goals. What can you do? What kind of curriculum can you buy? And that sort of thing. And just seek the Lord's guidance. Pray with your kids about these goals. It's really a good experience for them as well. And these are records. If you keep these, you can go back and look over the years how you've grown and how your kids have grown. And so and it also is a precursor for setting goals in the high school years, which we'll talk about in a minute. Now, if you have a special needs child, we recommend that you keep some records that are specific to your situation. Oftentimes, special needs children will have some sort of psychological testing or special needs testing that they have done to verify whatever diagnoses they might have, such as ADHD or dyslexia, autism, and so on. And so you want to definitely keep those results in a safe place where you can access them, because there are times that you might need them for receiving services or getting special accommodations for testing. And you might need to refer to them just to see what you need to work on with your children as well. You can save those digitally or in a fire safe or in a binder, wherever they're going to be easy to remember where they are, and you can find them. With special needs children, it's also wise to write up goals and a plan for how to help them improve and grow in the areas they struggle. In the public school, this is called an IEP, which is an individual education plan. Homeschoolers like to call it the SEP, which is student educational plan. And really what this is just, it's going to be listing areas where your student needs to grow, and then include how you hope to work with them to help them grow in those areas, that kind of the plan to improve those areas of weakness. And that can be behaviorally, academically, socially, all of those kinds of things. So language abilities and so on, what kind of therapies you'll have and that kind of thing. I would encourage you too in that plan to also list their strengths. Most special needs kids are gifted, and we want to help them grow in confidence. And so listing their strengths and how you hope to capitalize on that and help them get to utilize that strength more would be another thing to write in that SEP. And then keep record of documents for special education related services, any specialized instruction or intervention. and the frequency of those services and who's delivering those services and where they're provided. And then keep record also of anything that they give you as far as reports, like speech therapy might give you a report and what you're supposed to work on. Keep those things in your files and records as well. And these SEPs provide a plan for teaching that allows you to tailor your child's program to best suit their needs. And really, you need to set measurable annual goals. That's what this does, just like we were talking about a moment ago for all children. But you want to look for the areas you want to develop in their personality, like their behavior, but also in their academics and so on. It's written documentation that you need if you want to seek special accommodations for when they get up to the high school, college ages. If you want special accommodations on annual achievement tests, those kinds of things. If you're a little unsure of how to write an SEP, but you can go to the Homeschool Legal Defense Association website, and they have a template for writing an SEP. That's hslda.org. I've also helped do consultations to help people write SEPs. The next area we want to talk about that has some special or specific records you need to keep is the high school years. And we need to keep good records in the high school years because those records are going to help us to create the transcript, which is probably the most important document you'll create in your records. Just like we recommended the IEP and SEP and setting goals for children, we recommend you set some goals for your high school student and make a plan for those 4 years of high school. Nobody will probably ask to see this plan, but it's valuable to have. And we have a document that we use in our Navigating High School guidebook where it talks about setting the schedule or making a plan for those 4 years. And what you want to do is decide what your graduation requirements will be. As homeschoolers, we don't have to follow the public school requirements for graduation. We set our own. We're considered basically like a private school setting our own grad requirements. So you want to set goals with your student, thinking through what your grad requirements will be. Now, do you want them to follow what we recommend actually is most students should follow a college preparatory plan where their courses that they take will be what a college wants to see if they choose to go to college. Even if your student may not go to college, I've seen where students decide 5 years after they graduate that they want to go to college. So they really need to have that college preparatory plan if there's any chance they might go to college. If you have a struggling learner and you know they'll not likely be attending college, then that's fine to adjust their plan to fit their needs as well. There are a lot of accommodations for special needs kids at the colleges, so don't rule that out. I just want to say that as well. As you think through your graduation requirements, you can also consider how you want your child to develop, what life skills they should have and what character building things you might want to have or spiritual goals you might want. And you can even include those in your graduation requirements if you wish to. So have your students sit down with you. We really recommend having them be involved in making the plan. And once that plan is in place, obviously you'll probably tweak it each year because things change. And you'll want to keep this as one of the records that you do have over their high school years and write it in pencil so you can adjust as needed. So then over the next 5 years, 4 years, however long your student is taking high school level courses, you want to keep record of everything that they're doing. Again, to prepare that transcript. First of all, the big one is keeping a list of the courses, including a bibliography of what texts you use or materials they studied for those courses. And then also the credit value that they received, and then the grade that they received for that course. Now, sometimes people say, how do I know how many credits a course is worth? Sometimes your curriculum will tell you how many credits it's worth. Most core courses are going to be worth 1 credit, but another way that you can determine credit value is by the time spent working on the subject. So 60 hours of study is a half a credit, and 120 to 180 hours of work is a 1 credit course. And I know that's a big span of hours. 120 hours is usually your elective kind of courses, and 180 is your lab sciences, and then 150 is more the average core course. And so if that's how you're going to determine credit value, your student should be keeping track of their hours and keeping that in your records as well. Most textbooks, like math textbooks, will be 1 credit course if you complete that textbook, or even just 85, 90% of it the way the school does it. But we wanted to always finish our textbooks and learn everything that we could. So you'll also want to continue to keep samples of their work in every subject, one sample per quarter per subject, just like you've been doing all along. And then keep the names and addresses of outside teachers as well, in case you need to contact them for information as you create the transcript. I remember one time I needed to know, I didn't have the grade that they had given my students, so I had to call one of the teachers they had in a co-op, and I was glad I had kept that information. And then some other information to keep would be the honors and awards, any volunteer work that they might have done, any employment that they've had over the years, extracurricular activities. These may or may not go on your transcript. That's really up to you. I personally like to put them on the back side of the transcript because I think it shows a well-rounded student, especially when they're going to college. They can look at that, but you could use all those things also for when your student applies for scholarships. Having that saved will help them to remember what they've done as they apply for scholarships, should they decide to go on for college and do that. And then, of course, you want to keep the important test scores. Pardon?
I'm off script, but I want to encourage them. I have a senior in high school right now applying for college, not even for scholarship. And all of those things, her volunteer work, her employment, her honors and awards, all of her extracurricular activities, all of it is going into the Common App right now. And they're asking questions about what she did and what she learned. And so any documentation you have is helpful in just getting them into college at this point.
Right. So it's really these, just keep anything that they've done that you could share with someone in the future as far as all that they've learned, I think is really just key. And it will help you in creating that transcript, which is what we're going to talk about next. How do you create a transcript? It really isn't that hard. I don't want you to feel intimidated by creating a transcript. We do have a few recommendations. Transcripts should be typed and professional looking. They should be fit on one piece of paper, either one or two-sided. Some people like to keep it just to the one side. You want everything to be really clear. When you send it to a college or anywhere you might send it, it should be signed by you as the school administrator and sent in a sealed envelope. Never give a college a quickly put together handwritten list of courses that your student did, because first of all, it doesn't look professional. But secondly, if you missed something, they will not let you change it. Once it's submitted, that is what your student has completed. You can't add to it. So I've heard of parents just really regretting that. So make sure it's professional, it's well done, and everything you wanted is in there before you submit it. So you'll want to include your student's personal information, their full name, address, their contact information, email, phone number, and so on, parents' names, your school name. Keep in mind, you should not include their social security number on their high school transcript. This document gets handed out all over the place. You don't really want that available on that document. A school will ask for it where they need it, so you don't need to put it on their transcript. And then their academic information, you want to include the classes that they've taken, the credit earned for that class, and the final grade that they got for that course. And then you're going to want to calculate their grade point average every year, their yearly grade point average, but also their cumulative grade point average. That's over the years that they've been doing high school courses. You know, I'm going to admit something I did that I feel embarrassed about. Our daughter was applying to go to Northwestern University, and I handed the transcript to them, and he stepped out of the room a little later and came back, and he had to calculate her cumulative grade point average because I had not done that. So I'm telling you now, be sure to put the cumulative grade point average on so you don't have to be embarrassed like I was. He was very gracious, thankfully. But you want to begin, and you want to have your academic summary on there as well. And I think that's a nice thing because it shows the student has 4 credits in math, 3 credits in social studies, and so on. Not every transcript will have this, but I think it's a nice feature. And then the grading scale is a nice feature to have as well. And of course, your signature as the school administrator. And then I encourage you to begin creating your transcript for your student as soon as they start completing high school level courses. And just keep adding courses as they complete them. That will make your transcript more accurate, and it will, because the information is fresh in your memory, and you'll have all the details you need right there. Now, Tricia has gone to a lot of work to create an amazing transcript bundle. There's 3 different templates that you can have in this bundle. Plus, it tells you how to calculate GPA and gives you some more basics on creating a transcript. And then we just want to mention too, we have a guidebook for students available. This is for the student to actually go through, and it includes focusing on growing in their faith, getting to know their strengths and weaknesses, helping them learn how to set goals, a list of life skills that they can add to as well, but to help them think through what they need to know how to do before they leave home, and how to manage their time and their finances. And it also has a career development course included. And that 4-year planning document I showed you a few slides ago is in there as well. So you can sit down with your student and write that 4-year plan right there in that book. And there's templates for all those documents. So that is in a nutshell, the high school record keeping. We can talk more about any questions you have about that later. I think I want to make sure we cover everything. So we'll move on, but write your questions down or jot them in the chat if you have more questions about that.
We've talked about the why and we've talked about the what to keep. And now we're going to try to help give you some tips and tricks for how to keep the actual records. The transcript is a really great place to start that conversation. I think our number one tip is simply to simplify, to keep it as simple as possible. And anytime you can do something like use pre-made resources like a transcript bundle, you don't have to go, there's so many resources out there. We're going to share ours, but if ours isn't a good fit for you, there's a million resources out there. There's a lot of different transcripts that you can make. And so use something, you don't have to reinvent the wheel in today's homeschool world. You can use things that are already ready to go. Like this. Here's an example from a record keeping bundle. This is a record keeping grading sheet. And so it's an Excel spreadsheet. Don't worry, everything's locked down, so you can't really screw it up. And it has a tab for every subject. And if you go in and you put in your student's assignment and the number of points that were possible and the number of points they earned, it's going to calculate their grade on that assignment. And then it's also going to just keep a tally of what's happening with their cumulative grade and what their actual grade is. And so you don't need to create a rubric for grading and figuring out how to calculate all that. We've got something right here that just takes all the guesswork out of it, all the math out of it. We won't tell your kids that you're cutting corners on math. Use pre-made resources. There's a ton of resources in this record keeping bundle. I'll talk about them a little bit later, but this is just a really great example of this would take me a long time to do without this resource that's just ready there. So if you're wondering if something exists, I would encourage you to take 10 minutes to go look and see if you can find it somewhere and don't have to just recreate the wheel. Here's another one.
So have been helping homeschool parents over the years, I just realized there was a big need for planning and record keeping help for parents. That was just a big struggle. And so I created the Homeschool Life all-in-one planner, which includes homeschool planning and record keeping documents, as well as templates for meal planning and chore charts. And of course, it has your family planning with your calendars and so on, and a goal setting section. And then that school record keeping section and planning section, all of that, plus a spiritual growth section for parents. And it's much like how I did my planning and record keeping over the years. Mine never looked that nice, but now that I am not doing it anymore, I created one that you could have. So it just works so efficiently for me. And if this sounds like something that would be helpful to you, we have it on sale at a discounted rate, and I can give you a link, and then there's a code for getting the discounted rate as well. We'll try to plop into the chat there. So go ahead.
In addition to using pre-made resources, another way to just simplify the record keeping process is to use your lesson plans for record keeping. So you already know this if you're homeschooling and you use curriculum. A lot of curriculum today has a lesson plan built right into it. And so you can literally print that lesson plan out, put it in a notebook or a binder, and you can just check off the work as it is done. And now you have your plan for what is going to happen and the record of what was actually done. And so if something gets skipped or you choose not to do something, just don't cross it off. And it's a clear record of what work has been completed. And so if you are like me and you want a little bit more of a everything in one place kind of thing, I'm going to show you how I've used lesson plans over the years. Chris has a weekly lesson assignment document that she's going to share with you and show you. I like to simplify my life by doing things one time. And so I create a yearly lesson plan each year for each one of our kids. And this is a piece of that. And you'll notice on the left side, it says week, and it's a numbered week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way down to 33 to 35 weeks, depending on how ambitious I'm feeling as I'm creating this plan, which is usually quite ambitious. And then the reality me checks in about week 30 and says, maybe we need to do 33 weeks this year instead of 35. Across the top, you see my subjects and Bible, history, science, reading. And so I use this as a way to plan what we're going to do for the year, and also as a way to keep a record of what work has been done. As the students complete the work in history, that's our Mystery of History Volume 2. And the first week, we were working on week 8. And the reason for that is because last year we had completed weeks 1 through 7. And so then it was time to stop. And so I just picked up in this lesson plan right where we stopped last year. So it helped me to plan this year to have last year's record already indicated. And if we didn't get to it, then I know we didn't get to it because no one crossed it off. And so, and this serves so many purposes. Each one of my kids have their own plan that they have in their school bin. I keep a plan in my records. And then it also causes us to communicate and hold one another accountable. Mama, we're behind in history because you didn't do it this week with us. And you're right. And so it allows me to see what we're ahead, where we're behind, and all at a glance. And so one of the challenges of planning like this, though, is you plan for a whole year, you can be behind very quickly. And so on year 2 of using this kind of plan, I removed the dates that used to appear on the left side of that column. I found it very defeating that it said this date to this date, and now we were behind. And so the goal here is this is the plan for what we hope to achieve. And it does not actually matter if we complete less than week 1, all of those lessons in week 1, or if we need to complete some of them in week 2. And so it helps us know where we're ahead, where we're behind, where we need to kind of work a little quicker. And so this is a great way to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, if you will, to both plan and record keep. So you can use someone else's right out of the book, or you can use one that you create very simply in Microsoft Word. This is actually another template that is in our record keeping bundle. I just created a template that you can use from what I have used for years.
Well, we would do a weekly assignment sheet in our family, and I kept that in the binder that I was just referring to. I just had a one binder for all 4 kids. And I know some people will keep a binder for each child. It all fit in one, and I didn't want to have more binders sitting around, but I think you can do whichever you want and easily. So as Tricia said, I also used my homeschool planning documents as my record keeping documents. And this one is blank, but every week I would sit down on a Sunday evening. It took me about an hour to do 4 kids' weekly assignment sheets, because I generally knew, they were going to do the next lesson in math and what we were going to study as a family for science and so on. And then I'd put that in a plastic cover, and I'd put it in their school bin. That every student, every one of the kids had their own school bin with their personal math book and their language arts. And so they were responsible then that week to pull that out, do what they could do independently. And then we often did quite a few things together as well, especially in the younger years. But that sheet then I would take out of their bin at the end of the week. Well, I would be looking at it throughout the week to see how they were doing, because they would be checking off when they accomplished the work. And then I would put their grades for their math assignments and so on right on that sheet. And then I would take it out and stick it in my binder at the end of the week. And that was my record for that school week. And that included who was doing school and who wasn't, because if somebody was sick, that would get written on that document as well. If we were doing school, everybody was doing it unless they were sick. So it was the way it was. That was my attendance as well, keeping my attendance. And so that is kind of how I did my assignments. I feel like giving the student responsibility, and Tricia did this too, really helps build responsibility in the children to learning to manage their time and keep track. And they like to know what's ahead as well. So that can really make them feel empowered. They see, one of our boys would actually work ahead so he could have time with one of his friends on Friday afternoon. So it's not only, and it's just good for a lot of reasons to have a planning document and that works for record keeping as well. You can't really in your binder, you can also keep a list of the curricula that was used, the books that were read, any field trips that were taken, classes that were taken in co-op. I kept receipts too, so I could use those for tax purposes. And those things that are a little big for the binders, we would put in a bin like this and just store it. And then eventually at the end of the semester, we would pick one thing from each subject that they wanted to save. And those projects then would be put into like a little portfolio, or I'll show you kind of like the next slide, a sort of a expandable folder. I would then at the end of the school year, take everything out of my binder and put it into one of these. And then I might have a second portfolio or expandable folder for the projects. Although there were a couple years where we actually made a scrapbook with some of those projects. And it was so much fun to just pull that out years later, and the kids would laugh at some of the funny things they'd written or the cute little projects they'd done and they had done. And I actually found a couple of them recently. I'm not a hoarder, I promise. I just have a hard time giving up some of these precious memories. And so I'm excited actually to pull these books out and show them to my grandkids that this is what your mommy did when she was your age, you know? So it's fun to keep, and the kids helped me make those scraps. And so that was a lot of fun too. And if you don't have a lot of space to save things like that, you can always save things digitally by taking photos as well and saving things on your computer.
One more way you can simplify record keeping is to include your children. Now, admittedly, sometimes including our children creates another level of work and another level of management, but sometimes they can really be a huge help. I'm going to share with you 2 ways that we have incorporated our kids, even from an elementary age. You don't have to wait until your kids are old in order to have them help you. This is a weekly work assignment that we used to do. Again, Chris mentioned this is a great way for me to keep attendance of who was doing what each day. If there's a day that has all of the things blank, we clearly didn't do school that day. For whatever reason, it wasn't done. And so maybe I would write field trip there, or maybe I would just leave it blank. But they have their name and the date. And then when they finished their spelling, they could color in the letters on the spelling. When they finished their math, they could color in all those little math things. There's a section at the bottom that you can't see, work that they were to complete once a week. And so they would also color in all of their weekly work that was just once a week work. And so this was a way that my kids helped me keep records, and they enjoyed it. And again, we're passing responsibility off. We're training them to be record keepers. We're training them to be administrators. We're training them to be organized and to help in the running of the home and the homeschool. Now, I have bigger kids now, and we've had a year-end system for record keeping that I want to share, that Chris shared her year-end record keeping system. Sometimes that's hard to say. And so here's how we keep records of school samples and things like that. When my kids finish a workbook or a project, or they have a concert program, we have a bin in our house. It's very, very cleverly named the finished work bin. Yeah, we were really clever on that. So it's a finished work bin, and there's just a shelf down in the storage closet, and the kids just throw their stuff in there all year long. We don't sort it out. Joey's gets piled on top of Isaiah's, gets piled on top of Xandra's. And then at some point in the summer, when I've had enough of a break from school, and when I'm starting to think about the next school year, we pull that bin out, and the kids sort it into 6 piles. I have 6 kids, everybody gets their own pile. And then we send them out to the garage. And in the garage, we have an entire shelf dedicated to their school records. And one bin has 2 years in it. They bring the bin in, they find the bin that's oldest, and they bring it in, and they pull out that old work, and they put in the new work. And then they write the label for it with their name, the school year, and their grade. And they slide it in the front, close the bin, and put it back out in the garage where it stays out of sight, but it's there, and we have it, and we're compliant. And then we're left with the pile of papers that they just took out of the bin. And that is where a lot of joy comes from the past record keeping. We tend to save more than one project or one sample order because it's fun and it's easy to just throw a lot of it in there. But so then they have the joy of looking at what they were doing in 2nd grade now that they're a 7th grader or a 6th grader, and we all enjoy that. And then they'll pick some things that are special to them that they're going to put in their keepsake bin that they keep in their room, and they give me 1 or 2 things that they think I will enjoy, and I keep that in my keepsake bin. And that is how we store our long-term records, how we store our records. And I don't really have a lot to do with it. A lot of times I'm working on something else in that space with them, talking with them, and they are literally in charge of sorting and organizing our yearly records. We've done it for years. They know the process, and it doesn't take us very long at all. Now, if you're here tonight and you're like, this is all great, but I am so far behind the 8 ball, you have no idea. What do I do? And so we want to help you tonight. We want to give you a few tips and tools. I have a friend who has who had a high schooler, and she did a very good job of assigning work and classes and having her student complete work and of keeping that work. But heading into her daughter's senior year, she was looking at all of that work and thinking, well, I've got all the work, but I've not graded it, and I can't make a transcript without grading it. And I just want to say how integritous that is. I think that it would be very tempting in that situation to just make it up. But she's a follower of Jesus, and she loves him with her whole heart. And she wanted to do right by that transcript, and she wanted to do right by her daughter and the work that she had completed. And so she decided that she was going to tackle the work. She was going to grade it all, and she was going to create an honest transcript. So even if you're in that place right now tonight, and I bet most of you are not, I think that there is hope for you to create an honest transcript. And here's what you're going to see all of my points at once. My bad. But here's what she did. She made a plan, and her plan was a concentrated plan. She said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a weekend, a Thursday night, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and a bit on Sunday. And I am going to get that stuff graded. I'm going to do it. And she did. She spent her whole weekend doing that. It was overwhelming. It was challenging, but she did it. And at the end of the weekend, she wasn't completely finished, but she was in a place where she was like, okay, I can get this into my normal world, and we can get this transcript created. And so maybe you need to ask for help. You need to ask yourself, I need some time. I need some concentrated time to get this record keeping thing under control in our life. But maybe you're like, no way, I am not doing that. That is crazy. And you need to take a more incremental approach. So do it. Do what works for you. Set a time each week for 1 hour. Put it in the calendar. Do not schedule coffee with your best friend over it. Do not put the dentist root canal over that time. Hold the time in your schedule and ask your husband or a friend to hold you accountable to use that time. And then use it. Make a plan for the first week. You don't have to make a plan for every week. Just do one bit. Make a plan for that first week. What is it that I want to do? Maybe this week I'm going to sort all the work into the correct classes, or maybe this week I'm going to make a list of all the curriculum that we used, or whatever it is, make a goal for that 1 hour. If you finish at 45 minutes, give yourself a pat on the back and be done. Give yourself the rest of the time off. It's free time for you. If you don't finish, then you know exactly what you need to do next Thursday at 2 o'clock when it's record keeping time. You will be amazed at once you get started how quickly you will catch up and how quickly you will figure out good systems for getting all of that in order. I want to encourage you to ask for help, to not let shame overtake you because you're in this place. Don't make it worse, just ask for help. And so one thing I appreciate so much about her is that even that weekend it was a group of ladies together doing our own homeschool thing. And she asked for help at times. And you know what? It was the joy of her friends to help her, to come alongside her and sit with her, help her sort something, or help her grade something. And so if you need help, ask for it. Maybe your spouse is an administrative type, and maybe they would have some help for you, some ideas that might help you get started in a good direction. Or maybe this is a way that your spouse can be involved in the homeschool process. Sometimes we're looking for ways, maybe just me, I'm looking for ways for my husband to be more involved in the homeschool process. And so we have played to his strengths over the years. He loves to help the kids with math. So he gets SOS calls with text of the algebra curriculum problem that I can't figure out with the kids. And he gets calls at work and we sit over the phone call. So we use that because he loves doing that and he gets to still be a part of our educational process. So maybe this is a way for yourself to do that. Maybe you have a friend who's administratively gifted. Ask them to help you get started or to help you make a plan. Schedule a consult with us. Whatever you're looking at, we would love to help you devise a plan or take a next step in getting your record keeping under control. And the last thing I want to encourage you to do if you're behind or you're feeling overwhelmed by all of this is to use those resources. We already talked about this. It's a little bit redundant, but I want to mention this. This is brand new. I just hit the website yesterday and we put it together for this webinar because we're like, this could be a really great resource. And we put it together from some documents that exist in our all-in-one planner and some other documents that we've gathered over the years. And so again, the transcript bundle is there. You can buy just the 3 transcripts with the instructions of how to put it together, how to calculate your GPA. All of that information is there. You can just buy the record-keeping bundle, which has, I made a list. I may not tell them all to you because you might fall asleep at this point in the evening, but the record-keeping bundle has 12 different unique Microsoft Word templates, 18 documents in all. It's got the curriculum used one for field trips, books that you've read, volunteer hours, physical education tallies, that grading program that we showed you this evening. We've got tons of goal setting documents, high school planning document is in there. So there's tons of resources in that record-keeping bundle to help you take the next step. And then if you're like, I need it all, I've got a high schooler, we got to get all this together, you can buy both for a discount. So there's links in the handout. I'll try to drop the links into the chat if you want to take it. It'll take you directly to our Homeschooling with Confidence shop, and you can buy them. They're digital downloads. So they're gonna, once you check out, it's gonna email you, and you're gonna get it delivered right to your inbox. It's got unlimited downloads for you. Please don't misuse that for other people. Encourage them to purchase it themselves. But you can download it, and it'll be yours to use for all the days that you have in homeschooling left. All right, that was a lot. And now we want to know what your questions are. Continue to put those in the chat if you like. We're going to invite Dale to come back, and she's going to share some of those, and we're going to just toggle between the three of us to answer questions that you've got about record keeping.
All right, guys. So we had one from Kate. She wanted to know if there's any information for an elementary report card. She needs a 4th grade report card for a Minnesota ski passport this year. And she's not sure what it should look like.
Yes, we have that in both the record keeping bundle and in the all-in-one planner. There's a transcript or template for a report card. My kids were really motivated by report cards, so I kept report cards every year. And I included even character development on that, like how they were doing with character as well as academics. So it's a really nice report card. And there's a template.
I remember being in elementary school, and that was always part of our report card was they paid attention, their work ethic, whether or not they were trying or meeting their, living up to their potential kind of a thing. That was always part of our report card.
Yes,
and that's a great way to address character behavior with your kids, not in the moment. If you've seen a pattern of behavior in your child, it's a really great opportunity to just, when nobody's upset, to talk about that. So you can use that. Again, these tools are so multifaceted if we're just clever and wise in the way that we use them.
Anybody else have any other questions? Because I think we answered a lot of them while you guys were talking. We were able to answer some of them.
There was one about the college preparatory recommendations on that one sheet of paper, and that is for the total 4 years. In fact, college prep is actually around 23 to 30 credits total for the 4 years.
Yep. I noticed that after you started talking about the specific transcript, I was looking, I'm like, okay, so that was for the whole 4 years. Yeah.
Good question, though. Good question.
Yep. Anybody else?
Or comments?
Yeah, any comments
that you keep records you want to share with the group? We don't have the market on that. 3 years of elementary or middle, both. You should keep 3 years, continually have 3 years worth of records until high school. Then you want to keep all 4.
Yep. So keep the most 3 recent years.
Right. That's a good way to say it.
Yep.
There was something else someone asked here. I was just trying to find it again. Is there a way to determine?
I know you at one time had a career exploration curriculum. Is that on the website?
Yes, that is the student guidebook, the Navigating High School Student Guidebook. There's a career exploration course in there. It's a simple one. It's not really long and difficult. It's worth a quarter of a credit. And if you also have them do an ACT prep class along with that, you could call it a career and a college preparatory class or something like that. So, yeah.
Got to get those credits in.
Yes. And I really like the Career Direct assessment. And so it's based off of that assessment, but I also list other resources for doing assessments as well in that.
Anybody else? What do I do if I've thrown everything away up until this point? I mean, you just start from today then.
Yep.
That's what I would do. I would just be like, well, I'll just start from today. If you can go back and kind of get a little bit of an idea of, I remember that we did this kind of math, and I remember we did this kind of language. Or, I mean, you can kind of piece together stuff, but just starting from today, that's no harm, no foul. You'll be fine.
If it was in the high school years and you've thrown that away, then you really do want to be a little more intelligent to kind of go back and remember so you can apply it to the transcript.
Yeah, definitely get on that.
Yeah. But your student might even help you with that. Oh, good.
Elementary.
That's good. Don't worry. Just start now.
Just get started now.
Yeah, good.
So, okay, real quick. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. We keep the whole book for 3 years of each curriculum?
No, you don't have to keep the whole book. just a sample out of what they've done. They've done, like, maybe if it's a math book, a sample of one of the tests each quarter. You can get, I did do that at first, and you just don't have space for that. There's no way. I don't know how anybody would. So you don't need all of that. You can just keep the table, a copy of the table of contents if you want. So you can see what they covered.
Another thing that I've done in the past is I have went ahead and made on that document that had like all the different curriculum that we use for the year, just a link. So Amazon usually has stuff, Rainbow Resource usually has stuff, unless you're using something really obscure. Generally, those links don't change too much. So you'll be fine. Will this video be able to watch back? I came in the middle of the Zoom meeting. Yes, Michelle, you definitely will be able to go ahead and watch back. You will be putting links to it. You can look at the Michelle YouTube channel, which it will be resurrected with this video. And subscribe there because there will be a lot of other content going on there too. So, and you can also look at Homeschooling with Confidence. They will have it on their website. How do I know which courses qualify for being on the high school transcript? For instance, you mentioned algebra should be on the high school transcript. My 7th grader is taking it this year.
You know, some students start taking high school level courses in 7th grade, and they even do those CLEP tests and get college credit too.
Absolutely.
So if it is a high school level course, you can definitely start putting it on the transcript. Algebra is one. You can usually research that online and find out whether they're a high school level or not. Sometimes the curriculum will actually tell you.
It'll tell you
if it's a high school level or not as well.
Yep.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. If you also want to know about credits before college, I interviewed Kristen Lackey for our podcast. If you are not familiar, we have a podcast called Homeschool Minnesota. There's a lot of great content on there that'll help you with a lot of these questions. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and lots of other places. Anyways, check it out. There's a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, that podcast is great. You don't want to miss it.
Thank you.
Really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff, a lot of good people.
Thank you all for coming. It was really nice to be with you, and hope it was helpful.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chris and Trisha.
Thank you. Our pleasure.